So just for the recording and for people online. So before we start, I'll do the land acknowledgement. So I would like to acknowledge that we are on treaty land referred to as Treaty 4 territory, and the city of Estevan and all the people here are the beneficiaries of this treaty. Treaty 4 encompasses the lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect and honor the treaties that made all our territories, and we acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we are committed to move forward in the relationship with Indigenous nations in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So thank you for coming. Thank you for coming online. So this is our first workshop on the pitch competition, the $22,000 pitch competition, and just to help people write their business plan and get things going. So this is being sponsored by Community Futures, so I'll hand it over to Andrea, and you can talk about that.
Thank you, Gord. Thank you for that introduction. So my name is Andrea Brady, and I'm the General Manager with Community Futures Sunrise. Our office is based in Weyburn, when we cover the whole southeast part of the province. I'm excited to be here and partner with the Tech Hub and with the Sask Startup Institute, and can't wait to see what entries come out of this pitch competition. Community Futures Sunrise provides loans, advice, and support to small businesses throughout the southeast. We're one of 267 offices across Canada, 90 across the West, and funded by the federal government to provide services to rural entrepreneurs, so outside of the major centers in each province. We offer a number of services, including loans for business startup or expansion, as well as advising on business planning and just all facets of the business process. We also offer a number of workshops to business owners in areas such as growth, marketing, financial literacy. We provide community and economic development support to municipalities and organizations throughout the region as well. And we do have a few different programs that we're operating that are specific to the Community Futures office here in Southeast Saskatchewan. One of those is the Youth Biz Competition, and that is for students who are grades 6 to 12 throughout Southeast Saskatchewan. And they can enter to, if they have a business idea, they can enter and they can win some cash prizes that we have sponsorship for. So that information can be found on our website, and the deadline for entries is November 14th. And I know we've got several schools and quite a few students that have already entered. So we're looking forward to lots of great business ideas. And sometimes those are existing businesses, or they go on to start those businesses afterwards. So that's been really exciting for us. This is the 17th year of that competition. Another thing that we have going on right now is called Go Digital Sask. And that is a program that offers businesses and organizations, nonprofits throughout the entire province, up to 20 hours of digital support. So whether you need help with creating a logo and branding, social media assistance, building an e-commerce site or a website, we can help. And it is free of charge, and you get up to 20 hours of support. So we basically help you get that going, and then you can, hopefully have the tools to do that yourself, or you can hire someone else to help manage your website and your social media for you. And then we recently launched a 3-year program to provide educational opportunities to businesses and communities across the province in partnership with the other 12 offices in the province. And that is called the CF Webinar Series. So we have topics for nonprofit organizations, board members and council members, those looking to retire, those who are interested in artificial intelligence, all kinds of things. I'm getting the nod from Gord. So we have access to a large amount of programs and services through that, and the different partnerships that we have with different organizations across the province as well. And I did bring some gifts with me tonight that are on the table for those that are present in person. And we'll certainly leave some of those here at the Tech Hub too. So thank you again.
Awesome. Cool. Well, hello, everyone. Those of you that are in person, those online, super pumped to be here with you all. Today, we're going to be talking about business planning, the next steps after that, which is where to get financing, And once you have that, how do you actually start your business in Saskatchewan? So before we get into that, I'll introduce myself. My name's Stefan O'Reilly, and I'm the manager of SAS Startup Institute. A little bit about my background. I'm from Saskatoon, raised there most of my life. Did live in Nashville, Tennessee for a number of years, then came back to go to university, started off in engineering, then took a bunch of other classes and ended up with a business marketing degree. And I've been with SAS Startup Institute and the company for about almost 5 years now. So it's been a fun ride so far. Throughout my life, I've been around entrepreneurship quite a bit. My dad was a serial entrepreneur, and a few people in my family were as well. So it's been fantastic to have lived through those experiences and being able to now share that with you all. So like I mentioned, today we're going to go through a few things. At any point, if you have questions, let me know. We're going through a lot of information, so it might be a lot to absorb. So happy to take any questions along the way. And we'll just dive right into it. So before we get into the business planning piece of it, in case any of you are unfamiliar with SAS Startup Institute, we are an entrepreneurship program delivered by SRADA, so Saskatoon Regional Economic Development Authority, but we serve the whole province. So we support all entrepreneurs in all industries across Saskatchewan. So if you're a Saskatchewan-based entrepreneur, we've got you covered. And we're fortunate to receive our funding from a department of the federal government called Prairies Economic Development Canada. So you can thank the government for all the free services you can get through SAS Startup Institute. And we're also a member of the Western Canada Business Service Network. Essentially what that means is we're connected to a lot of other organizations within Saskatchewan that we can refer you to, such as Community Futures, but we also have connections to organizations in other provinces in Western Canada. In case you'd ever like to expand, we're able to make those referrals. All right, so let's dive into business planning. So first I wanted to start off with a question, and that question is, why are business plans important? So maybe for those of you in the room, I'll put it out to you. If seeing this question, why do you think a business plan is important? And no wrong answers. I'll throw it out to the two of you. What do you think? Why would you say business plan is important? So you don't go bankrupt? Okay, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, without a plan, you're planning to fail. Absolutely. All great answers. And those are all correct in a way of speaking. So yes, a business plan is important not only if you're looking to secure financing, but also for yourself as an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, you've got lots of things to do. You wear many hats. So you always got a lot going on in that brain of yours. So it can be really tough to have it all clear, and it can be helpful to write it out. That business plan is not there to be your yes man. It's there to be really honest with you, to let you know, hey, I actually have something here that I want to pursue. So in a typical business plan, there's 8 major sections, and we're going to go through each of those sections here today. Of course, each business plan is a little bit unique and different depending on the situation, but in general, these are the main 8 key parts we're going to look at today. And something important to note is they don't have to be written in chronological order. Say you want to start with the market analysis, right? You can go for it and then skip to human resources. It doesn't have to be done in that order there. So along our journey throughout this business planning process, we're going to use Susan, who's kind of a made-up entrepreneur, just to see how she attacks and deals with each of these situations. So Susan is a community-focused entrepreneur and is in the early stages of opening up a hair and nail salon, and she'll be following along with us throughout this journey, like I mentioned. So first part is that executive summary. So like I mentioned, it's the first section, and it's actually written last. So like I mentioned in the previous slide, you can do it in any order, but I would actually suggest writing this one last. So the purpose of the executive summary is to give you key components of your plan while also introducing the problem that you're looking to solve. So I like to think of it like a movie trailer, right? So a movie trailer shows you all those main parts so you understand what type of movie you're about to watch. So the executive summary is no different. And it should be typically around 2 pages. So it's nothing too big. You should kind of break it down into 2 pages so they have a good understanding of what they can expect going forward, okay? So that was a quick first one. So section 2 is your business introduction and description. So this is where you're going to introduce yourself and your company. So you should provide information like your company name, the stage of business that you're in, and even include the story of your business and how it came about. I think that's always very important to show how you're connected to this business and this idea. You should also include, the legal structure of your business, owner information, all that great stuff. When it comes to the description part of your business, provide the main features and benefits of your product or service, maybe any trends or challenges that are present, and then also that competitive advantage is a huge piece. So what makes you different than your competition? What's that advantage that you have, okay? Also included in the second section, you'll have your mission statement. I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with this or maybe seen this on various company websites. But the mission statement essentially describes why you exist, okay? And it can address any of these things here on the screen there. It can be a simple sentence or it can be a longer explanation. So as an example, one of Sreda's old missions, we no longer use this one, but it's an example of a little bit of a longer one. And it reads as such. So Sreda's role is to strengthen and grow the local economy by providing programs and services in the areas of business attraction and expansion, entrepreneurship, regional economic development, Indigenous economic development, and marketing the Saskatoon region. So that's an example of a longer one. If you're unsure how to start your own mission statement, I suggest looking at competitors for inspiration. That's often a great place to start. On the flip side, you'll also have a vision statement. So I feel oftentimes people can get the two mixed up, and rightfully so. So we said the mission statement was the why. The vision statement is where you ultimately want to be. So it's more inspirational or aspirational in nature. So an example of this would be a world without autism, right? It's like this far-reaching goal that you're hoping you can get. Another way I've heard it explained is kind of that thing that will put you out of business. What will put you out of business, essentially, right? It's that end goal that you want to achieve. Along kind of the last part of this section we'll chat about is objectives and goals. So you'll want to include some of those. And these are goals that you can use going forward to measure your success. It's always important to have these there so you can actually measure if you're doing what you need to do, right? And one goal setting method that we always suggest when setting objectives and goals is what's called the SMART method. So it stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So as an example, one of our old goals we had in the past was to assist 35 entrepreneurs in starting their business in Saskatchewan by the end of the year. So it's specific because we're focusing on entrepreneurs. It's measurable because we have a set number, right, the 35. It's achievable and realistic because we've hit similar targets in the past and we know it's within that realm of possibility. And we know it's timely because it has to be done by year's end, right? So framing your goals in this way makes it easier to measure when going forward. So when thinking about your objectives, think about some in different timelines. So maybe 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, have a mixture of those short-term and long-term. So I would encourage you to have at least 2 to 4 SMART goals, if not more, but at least if you can have a few of them, it'll make it easier for you to measure things as you go along. All right. Fantastic. So that brings us to the third section, the market analysis, which is a massive section. And it's so important because it sets the foundation for all the subsequent strategy pieces that we're going to look at, and it ensures that you're putting your money in the right place. So this section is so big, we're going to kind of divide it into two parts. So the first part we're going to look at is more around target markets. So your target market is essentially the people that you're selling to, it's your customers. And target markets are broken down in different ways, but can be broken down based on behaviors, habits, needs. Sometimes I hear entrepreneurs say, my target market is everyone, or I can sell to everyone, which maybe to a certain extent that's true, but you're going to be wasting a lot of energy, a lot of time, and a lot of money trying to appeal to everyone, right? So it only does you, it only helps you if you do focus in and focus on the right people, kind of the people that are going to pay the most for your business, okay? So as an example of a target market, I'm just going to use WestJet, for example. This might not be their official target market, but it's just one we've come up with. So for example, WestJet's target market could be adults over the age of 25 earning an income of $50,000 or above who travel twice a year for leisure. Okay, so that's kind of narrowing down who they're focusing. It doesn't mean that people who are outside of that can't fly with WestJet. It just means that the focus of their marketing and all their efforts will be to those people. Okay, so that's your target market. You also have market segments. So it's kind of a subsection of that, of a target market. And that's when you take that target market and you break it down into smaller groups. And why this could be helpful is it makes it a little bit easier maybe to target your communications or your marketing towards these people. So an example of segments based on our WestJet example could be maybe professionals age 30 to 50 who travel for business, could be families, maybe single adults between the age of 20 and 30 who are adventure seekers, right? So you can break it down a little bit more, and based on those groups, you can really adjust your marketing towards them. One thing I'll say is the success of many new businesses or successful businesses is often determined by how well they've identified their target market. So a lot of the best companies in the world, why they're so successful is they understand their customer, they understand their target market, right? They understand what their needs, behaviors, all these pieces, and they're able to tailor the experience and the product and the service for those customers. So I really encourage you to really get to know who your target market is. So when looking at your target market, you should look at it in these ways. So first, when identifying a target market is you want to make sure it's measurable. So there has to be an identifying size of a market, okay? It must also be distinguishable. So in other words, there has to be some sort of observable difference present. So it could be an age group, for example. It has to be substantial. So there should be enough people interested in your product or service to make opening the business worthwhile, right? If there's not enough people, you're kind of done before you even get started. And it has to be accessible. So think about who are you going to communicate to, and can you get to them? Are you able to access them through whatever communication channel you're hoping to use? So when looking at your target market, it's important to do your research, and I'll touch on a bit on how we can help support you with research to identify your target markets, as well as these other points we'll touch on here. So once you've determined your target market, you can now create what's called a customer profile. So a customer profile is essentially kind of a buyer persona. I like to think of it as creating like a visual character. So it kind of helps humanize your target market, because before it's just like words and bullet points and all that, but this really creates it into a character that you can imagine, right? So some things to include or elements to include in a customer profile could be demographics. So things like age or income, psychographics. So looking at people's beliefs or pain points, communication. So what language should you use? So the language that you use to talk to a scientist versus a high schooler is going to be dramatically different, right? So you have to keep that in mind. And then media. So how do they like to be contacted, right, is another piece. So an example of a customer profile, just a really quick short one, you'd probably want something a little bit more detailed than this, but here we go. So meet Amy. Amy is 28 years old and lives in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. She is a busy professional who values her aesthetic appearance. She enjoys following health and beauty trends and prefers to support local businesses. So based on this, I'm sure you all have a picture of that person in your mind, right? And that's very helpful when you go through the next strategy pieces to have that person locked in so that everything that you build is built around this customer. And it's possible you may have 2 to 3 customer profiles. I actually encourage you to create a few different ones. So you get a good reflection of who your customers will be. Fantastic. So that was the first part of your market analysis, so looking at your target market. The next piece we're going to look at is your internal and external analysis. So we're looking at things that are in your control and then things that affect you, but you have no control over. So there are some great tools that I'm going to share with you. It's possible you're familiar with them. But I'll go over them anyways. So a great tool to conduct an internal and external analysis is what's called a SWOT matrix. So I'm not sure if folks are familiar with that, but SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So for strengths, you're going to look internally at you and your company and evaluate what strengths do you have. So for example, maybe it's you have strong team knowledge or strong technology, okay? Then you're going to look at weaknesses. So internally, what weaknesses do we have? So maybe it's a lack of sales skills, all right? And then for opportunities, you will look outwardly into your environment and assess possible opportunities there. So maybe this could be an emerging trend or a change in regulation, right? That presents a good opportunity for you. And then lastly, you have threats. So same thing, looking in your environment, what threats are there? So maybe there's a technology change that threatens your business, or maybe a change in consumer behavior, right? That can be a huge threat. So it's really important to kind of look at all these aspects. So for example, you could put it in kind of a sort of matrix style, and it really helps you assess, okay, maybe what strengths do I have that allow me to take advantage of these opportunities or mitigate these threats? Or what weaknesses do I have that if I don't fix them, I might succumb to these threats, right? So it's a great way to find out where you fit. A few other tools I'm going to suggest. One of them is called PESTLE. So again, another acronym there. So the P in PESTLE stands for political. So all these, again, you're looking externally in your environment. So you're looking at political factors that may affect your business. So an example is, say with your business, you're planning to do like procurement or business with the government. They're going to buy from you, but they're in an election year. Well, when they're in an election year, they're not able to make purchases, right? So that would be a political factor that you'd have to consider, right? The first E stands for economic. So maybe there's a low employment rate, right? That could affect purchasing habits, right? The S is for social. So this could be maybe trends toward buying local, right? That's a huge trend right now. So it's particularly impactful if you're a franchisor, right? So that's something to think about there. T is for technological. So maybe there's a new app out there. So think back, whatever, 10 years ago, maybe that's too far back, but skip the dishes, right? And how that really changed the restaurant game and how they operated and how they delivered. So that had a huge impact on that industry. The second E is for environmental. So this could be, trend for grass-fed cows, right? So if you're in the cattle industry, maybe this affects how you operate your business. And then lastly, the L is for legal. So a big one that happened somewhat recently was legalization of cannabis, right? And that allowed for a whole new industry, a whole new influx of businesses to be launched. All right. So again, this is a great way to find out those factors that you don't have control over, but still affect your business quite a bit. All right. So the last market analysis tool I'll share with you is called the competitor analysis. Again, there's tons more things like this out there. Either Google can be your friend, you'll find a ton, or feel free to reach out and we can definitely suggest some for you. So this last one is competitor analysis, and there's two types. So you have your direct competitors. So in this example, we have Coca-Cola and Pepsi. They both offer cola drinks, right? Pretty self-explanatory. Then you have indirect competitors. So in this example, Coca-Cola and Booster Juice. So they don't both offer cola drinks, but they want your money by helping you quench your thirst, okay? So oftentimes when I talk with entrepreneurs, sometimes I'll hear the phrase, I don't have any competition. And that could be true, maybe direct competition, you don't have direct competition, but odds are you probably have indirect competition. So for example, let's say I want to start like a horse riding business, okay? And there's no other horse riding business for like 200 kilometers, right? I might think like I'm in the clear. But what if in your town you had a bowling alley, you had an arcade, you had a movie theater? Those are all businesses that are potentially competing for the same pool of money, that those entertainment or excursion or leisure dollars, right? So although they're not the exact same business, they're still your competition, right? They're still playing for the same pool of money. So if you feel like in your business you have no competitors, I would encourage you to think a little bit more broadly or abstractly, because most likely you do have competitors. And if you're not able to identify them, you know, then you might be in for a surprise later on. So just something to keep in mind. Amazing. So that ends the big analysis section. And that moves us on to our first strategy piece and section of the business plan, which is marketing and sales. For me, this is the most fun piece because I have a marketing background, but to each their own. So that now that we've analyzed our market, it's time to apply that research into this strategy. So we're going to look at the marketing strategy in terms of the marketing mix, or the 4 Ps. Is a fairly common model when looking at marketing. So we're going to look at each one individually. So the first P is for product and service. So in this section, you should include details on your product or service. And how does that product or service meet the need of your target market? So again, circling back to that target market. So try and describe the service or product in terms of like the look, the feel, the user experience, right? The customer experience, what they go through. You know, when writing this section, you may want to consider things like, is it mass produced? Is it customized? What life cycle is it in? Is it a new or existing innovation? Has it been tested in the market? Like, that's super important information. So again, all about your product and service. The next P is price. So this is looking at how much will you charge for your product or service. But not only that, but the why are you charging it? It's one thing to set a price, but you have to have the why. You have to have a reason, or else you're just throwing things out there. So I've decided to go over a few different pricing strategies with you. Again, there's tons more out there, but these are just a few I thought I would highlight. So the first, we have versioning. So this is when you offer different versions of a product at different price points. So an example could be cars. So you have your basic model, your sporting model, your touring model, okay? You also have differentiation. So this is when you offer it at a variety of prices for the same product or service to different groups. So think of movie theaters. So you have your matinees versus evening shows or group discounts, things like that. Bundling is a third one, and this is where you offer multiple products for one attractive, comprehensive price. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. If you know Shaw or SaskTel, you get your mobile, TV, internet, all for one bundle, right? And one price, boom, easy. So that's the strategy there. And the last one I'll mention, which is a really interesting one, is called the loss leader. So this is when a product or service actually loses money on its own, which I know is probably weird to think, but it requires the buyer to purchase additional products or services to fully experience that loss leader. So an example of this could be, hey, you walk into Staples and you're like, I'm going to buy this awesome cheap printer. Like, yeah, I'm going to save so much money. But then it's like, oh, you need this really expensive ink in order to use a printer. And that's how they make their money. They suck you in with a cheap printer, but you have to pay for that expensive ink to even use that printer, okay? So that can often be an effective pricing strategy. So whatever you do, think back to the goals that you set in section 2, as this might help you determine your price, right? Based on your goals that you have. You could also look at your competitors, see what they're charging. That's also a great place to start. But ultimately, it's thinking about, what is the value of your product? What is the experience you're delivering? And then go from there. The third P is place or distribution. So fairly simple. So where can your customers go to buy your product or service? So will you sell online, stores, that sort of thing? So describe that process. What does that purchase process look like for the customer? And then the fourth P is promotion. So how will you connect or communicate with your target market? So how will people find out about your product, right? If they don't know about it, odds are they won't be buying it. So there's a wide variety of tactics you can use to promote to prospective clients. There's a bunch there on the screen. You don't have to be in all of them, and I actually encourage you not to. It's important to be selective, right? Think back to those customer profiles. If you have a really good understanding of who your customers are, you're going to know how best to promote to them. But certainly in this day and age, a strong digital presence is almost required. So definitely having that digital presence is so important. So again, look back to your customer profiles, think about who you're selling to, and this piece will be much easier. All right, so we're on our second strategy piece, section 5, which is human resources. So essentially the purpose of this section is to convince potential investors, loan officers, and any stakeholders that you have a great management team to complement a great business concept. So many venture capitalists will claim that they would rather invest in a strong management team with a mediocre idea over a weak management team with a fantastic idea, right? It's all about the people. You can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you don't have the people to execute it, it doesn't matter how great your idea is, right? So essentially this is a section to like brag about yourself a little bit, which for me, I find that difficult to do, but like I encourage you to brag as much as you can in this section. So when readers are done with this section, you want them to be confident that the project will be competently managed, all right? So in this section, include things like your accomplishments and capabilities. Again, don't hold back. I know it's easy to do so, but don't hold back. Skills and strengths that you have, even including advisors, mentors, consultants, right? The business is more than just yourself as an individual. It's all those partners you have, those advisors. So could be Community Future, SaaS Startup, like anyone that's in your corner helping you through this business, okay? Look at maybe the company's management style or philosophy, really any aspect of HR strategy you'd want to include, okay? So again, brag about yourself. If you take anything away from this, brag about yourself, okay? So operation strategy. So this is the third and final strategy piece we're going to talk about today, and it's regarding operations. So this section essentially outlines how will you run your business to deliver value for your customers. So I encourage you to carefully link the design of your operation with your marketing plan. So they should really work cohesively together. If they're not, then something's off. You got to adjust something. So for example, if high quality is one of your competitive advantages, you have to make sure that your operations will deliver that, right? And not low cost or something like that. You've got to make sure they're in sync. So it's possible you might have to make trade-offs. So, if it's impossible to have the lowest cost and have the highest quality, right? Usually high quality means higher costs, and then low cost means maybe less variety or less flexibility, something like that. So it's always important to be thinking of that. So in your operation strategy, include things like even a general day-to-day description. of the operations of your business. So what does it look like from start to finish? Okay. Maybe you have some sort of facility. So what facility requirements do you have? Do you have certain tracking systems, information technology, lease agreement, all that sort of stuff, okay? If you are in manufacturing specifically, like that's your business, most likely you'll have your own operations manual, which if you do, you could add that to this plan in the appendix, which is often great. So again, making sure to link the operations with the marketing. It should go pretty hand in hand. All right. So big one is financials. I'm sure it's everyone's favorite. We love numbers and crunching data and money, right? So in the previous sections of the plan, we've looked at, outlining the business concept, demonstrating that there's a need in the market, showing how you're going to execute the ideas, proving that you have the team to make it happen. So now you need to turn all that into numbers through financial projections and kind of how you're going to make the money and also when you're going to make the money. That's also important, okay? So we're going to look at a few things here today. So when looking at financial forecasts, you should provide projections under 3 different assumptions. This is what we suggest. So do projections based on what you think your best case scenario is going to be. So if everything goes right, what does that outcome look like? On the flip side, you're going to look at what's the worst case scenario. So if like things just suck, right? Maybe for a lot of people, COVID was that worst case scenario, right? So what does that look like? And then you're going to have your average case scenario. So this average case scenario is kind of what you expect to happen, right? Is what you think is going to happen. And we also encourage you to do it for a minimum of 2 years if you can. So do those 2 years scenarios for each one. And you can provide graphs and all that in the plan, and then all that additional data you could put in the appendix at the end. So the place we're going to begin is startup costs. So the first thing when you start is, right, how much investment do you need to start the business? So how much capital do you need? Second, you need to think about where is the money going to come from? Is it going to be a bank loan? Are you going to be bootstrapping? Is it an investor? Whatever it may be. You want to consider the cost to starting. So whether that's cost prior to opening, whether that's equipment, marketing, inventory, legal, professional fees, it kind of goes on and on and on. So I'll touch in a bit on where you can access financing if you do need. But here we have an example or an estimated budget for a new coffee roaster company. So just kind of the big piece here is just make sure based on what your needs are for starting, that you have a plan of where you can get that money from, and making sure that the total funding and capital available at least equals or exceeds your starting costs, right? You really don't want to start your business with not enough money, because then it kind of sets you on the back foot right away. So just important to take note of that. So now that you have your startup costs, you need to analyze your sales revenue and operating expenses to decide whether it's going to be worthwhile to invest the capital you need to start up. So you'll look at sales projections. So this is a gross amount of money you expect from sales of your product or service. Again, I'd like to highlight these are projections, right? If you're just starting off, you're not going to have any concrete data, that you've gone through before. So when looking at this, you'll want to set a price and then apply it to all those calculations that you do. And then again, on the other end, looking at those costs. So, you should provide expected costs over a 12-month period at the minimum. So looking at those operations costs, those fixed and variable costs that you'll be looking at, all right? So here's just a quick little snippet of a sales forecast for you. It's only showing 6 months, but as I mentioned, 12 months is what we suggest. So it kind of breaks that down. I'm happy to send out these slides too if people would like. I know there's a lot of info on them, so I'm happy to do that. When looking at your financials, especially in your business plan, a break-even analysis is super important. and it really determines at what sales volume or a given price, what you need to have in order to recover your total costs. So it's basically where your revenues equal your costs, and everything after that is profit. So for service-based businesses, you'll have to define what your unit is, right? Because if you have a product as a physical thing, you can count it. But if it's a service, you'll have to define your unit. So whether it's hours, treatments, courses, customers, whatever it is, okay? So this graph here essentially illustrates what a break-even is. So the biggest takeaway is that your costs will be greater than your revenue when you start, and then you'll hit that little dot, so that break-even point where revenues equal costs, and then after that, your revenue will be greater than your costs, and you'll be then making a profit. So just to note that as a startup, you might not always be break even right away. Like it might take you a little bit of time. It's definitely very industry dependent, right? If you're a tech business like Facebook, they didn't start turning a profit till I think year 5, right? But if you're a restaurant, you probably want to start getting there pretty quick, right? So just something to consider there. Perfect. So I think I touched on this, or I'm just going to skip that. So here I've outlined the formulas that you can use to calculate your break-even point based on units and dollars. So I'm happy to send out a copy of this, or if you look up break-even analysis, you'll get the formulas there. So the biggest thing I would suggest is when doing these calculation, play around with different numbers. So for example, if you were to add a person to your payroll, how many extra sales dollars would you need in order to recover that salary expense? Or if you were to borrow money, how much would you need to sell in order to cover that increased principal, right? So play around with different situations, okay? So here we have an example. So based on this example, they either have to sell 48 units or $1,920 in order to break even. If they sell more than 48 units or more than this amount in sales, they'll be making a profit, all right? So again, when looking at your break-even analysis, go back to those 3 scenarios that I mentioned, the worst, average, and best case scenario. And if you need to, like, say you look at your break-even analysis, is like, oh boy, this is going to be too low or too high. Maybe think about, okay, what if you cut your fixed expenses or fixed costs? Would that get you there quicker? If you increase your selling price, how would that get you quicker? And the last piece in the financials I'll mention, and yeah, there's definitely a lot of pieces, but I'll finish on this, is you have your projected financial statements. So there's 3 main statements I'm going to touch on today. And the first one is a balance sheet. So this is a snapshot of what you own and what you owe at a particular point in time. So since you're writing this business plan, most likely in the startup stage, this will be projected balance sheet. So it's also sometimes called a pro forma, is another name for it. So this is a rough outline of what a balance sheet looks like. So you have your assets, which is what you own, your liabilities, which is what you owe, and then you have your ownership equity, which is shares plus and capital and retained earnings there. So a tip for you, as the name suggests, balance sheet. So your assets have to equal your liabilities and capital. So it has to balance out. So 314,000, 314,000, okay? So if you need a blank financial statement template like this or any of the other ones we'll touch on, let our team know. We can provide you those templates, or we can even provide you examples like this. We have business plan samples we can provide based on certain industries. So if you just want a reference of what a business plan looks like, we can provide that to you, and then you're able to access these financial statements there too. The second most common financial statement is an income statement, also known as a profit and loss or operating statement. There's a few different names there. And essentially it's looking at a business's revenues and expenses. So profit or loss over a specific period of time. So your revenues minus your expenses either equals a net income or net loss. Okay. So here we have an example of a statement. So we can see that they have a net profit of $65,000 in the first year, okay? So a tip for you, usually investors are really interested in the income statement because they want to know how quickly they'll make their money back plus profit. So this is a statement they're particularly interested in. And then the last statement I'll touch on is what's called a cash flow statement. So in the previous statements we've looked at, none of them really mention cash or cash flow, right? It's assets, it's revenue, it's expenses. So it's possible you might have a net profit in your income statement, but you might have a negative cash flow because you're waiting on invoices to be paid. So you've made the sales, you've recorded them as sales, but they haven't actually physically paid you yet. You don't have the cash in hand. So a cash flow statement really helps you understand when cash is coming in and coming out, right? So it'll tell you whether you have enough cash on hand to actually pay your lease, your inventory, all those pieces. You have the money to actually pay it. So I really encourage businesses to check your cash flow statement at least monthly, because if you do have a negative cash flow, you need to figure that out quick. Because oftentimes this can sink a business if they do not have enough cash flow. So it's something I encourage you to keep an eye on religiously if you can, okay? So again, here's an example of a cash flow. As I mentioned, make sure it's not negative. And there's definitely a lot of great templates out there like cash flow statements, things like that. So happy to recommend that. All right, so the last section of a business plan we're going to look at is the exit and succession plan. So I'm sure it's probably a little bit weird, like you're here, you're looking to start a business and it's like, oh, I got to think about what happens when I exit or leave the business. But the thing is you never really know when it's going to happen, right? So it's important that you have a plan in place. And it can be important too, because you might have spent all this time creating a foundation or a pillar for your community, right? Or kind of that legacy or something that's valued by the community. And like I said, you never really know when things could happen, right? It really helps deal with unexpected events like, illness or even death, right? So it's important to have that strategy in place. So maybe that's selling the business. Maybe that's a buyout to a partner. Maybe it's passing it on to your family, right? It's important to think about that. So whatever you decide, make sure you keep it up to date as time goes on, right? Because the environment changes, you change, your relationships change, right? So just make sure you keep it up to date as time goes on. So when developing your exit or succession plan, talk to professionals, right? You have lawyers there to help you, whether it's accountants, bankers, tax professionals. Use their expertise to help you put this plan in place, okay? So again, I know it's kind of weird since we're talking about starting and already we're looking at what happens when we exit, all right? So to wrap up the business planning portion, just some other considerations when looking at your plan is make sure you think about the audience that you're writing it for, right? So if it's for a bank, is it just for yourself? Is it for an investor, partner, whatever it may be, right? Keep that in mind. As I mentioned at the beginning, every business plan is unique to a certain extent, right? But make sure you include a cover page that has your business name, logo, contact info. Occasionally I've heard horror stories of people, handing in a business plan to bank and they don't put their contact info on it. And it's like, you're out of luck. They got an amazing plan, but they don't know who to contact after, right? So it's those easy things that we can forget. I'm sure we all remember being in school and the teacher's like, make sure to write your name on the test. And you're like, why would I ever forget my name? And then it happens, right? So just make sure, don't forget the little details. Another thing you may want to consider is a non-disclosure agreement. Generally, I would say don't worry about it, but certain industries, maybe if you're in tech or things like that, or the technology you're dealing with, some people like to have that. If that's something you would like, we do have a non-disclosure agreement template that can kind of set the foundation for yours. Another thing is a table of content, right? So having that at the beginning really helps the reader navigate throughout your plan and get to the part in the plan that they want to read most. And then also you can have the appendix, which is at the end. It's an additional section that you could provide additional resources, information that support the rest of the data in your plan. All right. So some next steps. I know I kind of whipped through a business plan pretty quick, and I know there's a lot there, but at SaaS Startup Institute, we have a lot of resources that could help you with this program. So one of them is our business plan samples that I mentioned. Generally, we can try and find one close to your industry. We also have a free business plan template that you can download that really sets that framework for you, so you're not left guessing, you know, what type of questions should I or answers should I put in this section, right? It really helps you out with that. Market research, which I'll touch on here in a bit. You can also meet with one of our business planning experts. We have an expert program that includes lawyers, accountants, marketing experts, and also business planners. And we can review sections of your business plan if you need. It's not something we do often, but say, hey, you're really stuck with the section, just want a second pair of eyes. That's something we could do too, okay? So as I mentioned, market research, it's a huge important piece of that market analysis, is understanding your industry, competitors, your market, all of that. Unfortunately, at SaaS Startup Institute, we do have resources to help you through that. We have access to a number of databases that allow you to access it for free. So a lot of these databases you wouldn't be able to access yourself because it costs a lot of money, but fortunately we're here for y'all, so happy to do it. So the first type of research report we're going to look at are business listings. So this gives you information or overview on your competitors, essentially. So for example, let's say I want to open up a pub or a bar, and I want to know a list of all the other bars in Estevan, right? I want to know who my competitors are. Based on those factors, we could generate a list that provides information such as company name, contact information, estimated expenses, and revenues. We can also customize the list based on sales volume or even employee number of employees, but typically industry and location is what we use most. So not only does it help you identify competitors, but let's say as a bar, I want kind of kitchen equipment, right? I need to find a supplier. So we could look at kitchen equipment wholesalers and get you a supplier list. Or maybe it's say, hey, with my business, I want to target accounting offices because they always like to get lit at a bar. I'm going to contact accounting, or that's my target group. So we could potentially give you a sales list, right? So you can use it in different ways. So for an example, this is a quick snapshot of what it looks like. So for example, this is for, I think, limited service restaurants in Saskatoon, which essentially means fast food. So again, you have company name, contact info, estimated expenses. So yeah, so there's over like 1,300 fast food restaurants in Saskatchewan, which is a lot. So we do have some restrictions on how many results we can give you at one time. So we wouldn't be able to give you like 1,300 results in one batch. Typically, we can do about 250. But generally, you'll never really need much more than that, depending on your industry. We're always happy to chat through it. The second type are industry reports. So this will look at a certain industry, either in Canada, the US, or even Saskatchewan based on the industry. And it looks at the trends of that industry, outlook, performance, and it helps you get a better understanding of the industry. We do request, but we're happy to help you through that. The third type are demographics and expenditures. So now looking at your market. So this will provide you information, like I mentioned, on your market. So say, hey, we're in Estevan right now. I want to know more about the market in Estevan, or Estevan in a 30-kilometer radius, or we can even draw a custom area on a map. And it will give you information like the population breakdown, income level breakdown, languages spoken in the home, even as household expenditures, so how much they spend on women's clothing, men's clothing, even I think like bacon, if you want to know how much people spend on bacon, if like, it's like, hey, yeah. So again, just a quick little highlight of what that looks like. Again, it's much more expansive. I think these reports are like 30 pages or something like that. So, and then the last one I'll mention is just for further stats, reports, and insights. So it's a database that we recently got called Statista. So the previous databases I mentioned, essentially you send us the industries you'd like, and we have to go through and find the information for you. The different thing about Statista is you can actually visit their website and find the data and reports that you want, and then you send us the page links and we're able to download it for you. So this database is fairly extensive, so it provides reports across 170 industries and 150 countries. So it's got a lot of information. So I really encourage you, comb through Statista, so statista.com. If there's anything that you're interested in, send us the page links and we're happy to provide that for you, okay? All right, take a breather here. Community Futures. So they're a great resource for you when it comes to loans and funding. So I encourage you to reach out to their team. They're fantastic to work with. But there's also a lot of other ones out there too, right? So Canada's Small Business Financing Program, I believe you can get financing of up to $1 million. Futurepreneur is a great one. So if you're a young entrepreneur, so that's anyone between the age of 18 and 39, they provide financing for you. The great thing about their financing is it also comes with mentorship options too. So it's kind of a double whammy. And they have a great team there too. They have different streams. They have like a side hustle program. So if you're just kind of creating a side hustle, they do that. Or if you're a Black or even Indigenous entrepreneurs, they have specific streams there. You have WESC, so Women's Entrepreneur of Saskatchewan. If you're a majority owned female business, they're fantastic. There's a Black Entrepreneurship Loan Fund. BDC is a fantastic resource, a lot of great kind of guides, videos, but they also provide financing for small businesses. And then also if you identify as Métis or Indigenous, there's SEAF, so Saskatchewan Indigenous Enterprise Foundation, Clarence Campo Development Fund, or SMEDCO are also great options. So essentially, funding is kind of the one thing we don't do, but as you can see, we can connect you to a lot of organizations and opportunities. There's a lot of other, I don't think I'll go through this, but whether you're looking for like research funding or tax incentives, or even, you know, sometimes municipal, like City of Estevan might have some stuff too. But if you are looking at funding, feel free to reach out to us and we can help you navigate that world on where you can get it, okay? So now that you got your business plan, check, you got your financing, or you know where you can get your financing, check. That next step is now to set up your business in Saskatchewan. So we're going to go through what that looks like in general. Of course, every industry, there's little differences, but this is the general steps. All right. So we're going to look at first choosing your structure and how to register your name. We're going to look at then license and permits. Then we're going to look at taxes and then employer obligations. All right. So the first thing you're going to do is choose your structure and register your business name. So business structure. So there's essentially 4 main structure types. So you have sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, cooperative. I'm not going to really touch on cooperative today is fairly rare. Like they do happen, but we don't see them a lot. There are some great organizations out there that help with cooperatives. So if you are thinking about it, let me know and we can connect you. So I'm going to focus on the first three here. So we do have a guide on our website. We actually have a whole guide section that has a lot of resources and reading material on different startup topics. One of them is business structures. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to read that. But essentially, we'll focus on the first three. So you have sole proprietor, which you can be one owner essentially, and then a partnership, you can be two or more. And they essentially share kind of similar advantages, disadvantages. So as a sole proprietor, essentially you are the business. There's no real differentiation between self and entity. So all the money that you make is considered personal income. So I like to think of it as a limb, as part of you. So if you make money through your business, it's then taxed at personal income tax rate. So say if you have a day job and your business, the money essentially gets pooled together and taxed together. Since you are the business, there is unlimited liability. So if there's some sort of legal action against the company, essentially, personally, you're liable as well. Again, I wouldn't get too hung up on that. I know a lot of people do. You can get insurance and liability insurance to help cover that. And the nice thing about a sole proprietorship is that it's just a little bit easier to operate, fewer regulations, fees, that sort of thing, okay? A corporation, on the other hand, is a separate legal entity. So it's a separate being. I like to think of it kind of as like a child. So it's like its own thing, but you kind of like influence it and tell it what to do. But if the child gets in trouble and has to go to court, well, it can't represent itself. So you have to go to court and represent it on its behalf, okay? That's kind of like what a corporation is. So since it is that separate legal entity, you do have limited liability. So you do have a bit of that personal protection. It doesn't mean you're totally immune from whatever you do, but in general, you do have that protection. A nice thing about a corporation too is corporate income tax tends to be generally lower than personal income tax rate. So that's great. But it's just a little bit more involved to operate is kind of one of the downsides. So that's the quick version of it. Our team would be happy to go through this with you in more detail if you're kind of not sure which way you want to go. So happy to chat about that further. So now that you've got your structure down, now it's time to look at the name of your business. And to me, this is like the big thing. It's like naming your child, right? What's their name going to be? But there's a few things I encourage you to think about. So before you even, finalize on a name yet, do some research. So first off, do a basic Google search. Like that's the first thing. Like type the business name you're thinking about into Google, see what comes up. Next is make sure, if you want a website or if you're going to be on Facebook, Insta, whatever, TikTok, whatever it is, make sure that those social media handles are available. And then if you really want, you can actually do a free trademark search on the Canadian Intellectual Property Office website, okay? So with all that considered, there's a couple rules when it comes to registering a business name. So you need essentially two parts in a business name. So you need a distinctive phrase and a descriptive phrase. So in the example we have here, the distinctive phrase is Canada National. So essentially it's a part of the name that's unique or that differentiates you from other businesses. So typically this is what most people come up with. But you also need a part that describes in some way what your business does. So in this example, we have railway. So that has to be something that, so people know, hey, okay, I think I have a general idea of what industry they're in, okay? And then if you're a corporation, you're also gonna have a legal ending. So there's actually 6 different legal endings. There's no legal difference between them. So you have limited, and then the short form LTD, you have corporation, corp, incorporated, and Inc., okay? I also get the question too, like, hey, for my sign on my storefront or from my marketing, do I have to use a full legal name? No, you don't have to if you don't want to. Like some people just like to use a distinctive phrase as part of that, and that's okay. But in terms of your fully registered legal name, you need all these parts, all right? All right, so now that you have your, your structure, your business name, now it's time to register that and make it your precious, right? So to do that in Saskatchewan, it's done through an agency called ISC, or Information Services Corporation. So what you're going to do is you're going to create an online account, and through that online account, you'll be able to do this process. So it is something you can do yourself, but it's also something our team does on a daily basis, and we're happy to go through it with you. We can't do it for you, but we could set up a meeting. We'll go through the forms together. Happy to do that with you. I know the Community Futures team can also help you with that as well. So either one, definitely seek help going through that, because I know sometimes it can be a little tricky. So in terms of the general process, like I mentioned, is 2 steps. First step is to reserve the name. So essentially you're going to say, this is a business name I want. This is a type of business it is. You're going to pay $50 and you're going to submit that to ISC. They then have to review your submission. Normally it takes a couple days, but it really fluctuates with how busy they are. And they'll either let you, give you the thumbs up or the thumbs down. If it's a thumbs down, in general, you can resubmit a new name for free. You have 30 days to do so. There are some exceptions. If you have the thumbs up, they will temporarily hold your business name for 90 days. So it's not yours yet, but they put it on hold for you. And that's where you have to then complete the second step, which is to register or incorporate your business. So for this, the price is going to vary depending on the structure you choose. So if you're a sole proprietor or a partnership, you're looking at about, I think it's $65, or a corporation is about $255, okay? And throughout that registration process, you'll actually have the option to register for your PST account, or even receive more information on workers' compensation. They have that built in, so that's a nice feature. Once you've completed that process, your business name is officially registered in Saskatchewan. One thing to note is you do have to renew it. So for a sole proprietor or a partnership, you have to only renew it every 3 years at a cost of $50, whereas a corporation is every year at a cost of $50, all right? There's also the option if you could federally incorporate. Generally, I only suggest this if you really plan to be, you're across Canada, you're getting fairly big. If you're just starting off, I probably wouldn't recommend it. Even if you do federally incorporate, you still have to incorporate in each individual province that you operate into. So I just generally suggest start with provincial registration, cross the federal bridge, if and when you get there, okay? So once you've registered that business name in Saskatchewan, you can move on to that second step, which is to acquire licenses and permits. So a resource you can use to find those resources as a site called BizPal, so bizpal.ca. It helps you find regional and industry licenses, basically input your location and what industry you're in, and kind of gives you a smattering of answers. It's not entirely comprehensive, so it does take some time to sift through. That's what I always suggest. Talk to our team. We can point you in the right direction of what licenses and permits you may need, or who you can talk to really identify those. A few great resources is, depending on your industry, there might be an industry association. So if you're kind of in an engineering field, there's APEGs, right? So they'll be very knowledgeable on that industry and what's needed. And then also your municipality. So based on where you're operating out of, most likely you'll need a municipal license. Each municipality is different. So say if you're in Estevan, talk to the city of Estevan, see what their requirements are there, okay? But again, each industry is going to be very different, right? If you're, doing, I don't know, marketing consultant versus, like selling used cars or something, is going to be very different, okay? And again, our team's there to support you through this, so any questions, reach out. Next is to open applicable tax accounts. So I know everyone's favorite topic is taxes, right? So we're gonna look at a few things here. I won't get into it too much. We also have a fact sheet or a guide on this as well if you want to learn more about taxes in Saskatchewan. So I won't spend too much time on that here. But essentially you have two. So your PST, your provincial sales tax, that's done through the Ministry of Finance. So I'm sure as you're familiar, 6% of retail price. As I mentioned earlier, you can start this registration process during your business name registration. If not, you just have to go to the Ministry of Finance website to do that. If you're ever unsure on how PST applies to you in your industry, They actually have a lot of great resources and PST bulletins that provide information on how PST applies to different industries. So I encourage you to read through that. On the other side, you have GST, which is your federal sales tax, and that's through Canada Revenue Agency. And that's 5% there. So PST, right, provincial, and that is mandatory. You do have to register for PST, but depending on your industry, you might not have to charge it. For GST, it's a little bit different. It's not mandatory to register for a GST if you're making less than $30,000 over a 12-month period. But as soon as you do have an account open, you do have to charge the tax, okay? So again, happy to go through that in more detail if you do have any questions. But in general, I usually recommend just register for it right away. That way, you don't forget, because you don't want to get to $30,000 in sales, not have a GST account, then you're going to be hit with some financial penalties, which is never a good thing, right? So just making sure you're keeping on top of that. I'm going to touch briefly on income tax. I know I talked a bit about this looking at the structures, but if you're a sole proprietorship or partnership, you'll be completing that individual tax return, that T1. But you also submit another form, which is a statement of business activity, which is a T2125, in case anyone wants a specific code name. So again, the owner is taxed at that individual rate based on profits and all that. So on the flip side, corporation, as I mentioned earlier, I guess you yourself as the individual will file your individual tax return, your T1 like normal. And the corporation, since it's its own being, right, files its own income tax, but that is known as a T2. And the corporate rates apply to that. So for both corporations, sole proprietors, partnerships, I encourage you to keep track of your receipts, mileage, time, all that sort of stuff in case of an audit. I know for sure for corporation, it is required that you keep all this for a period of up to 7 years, so 7 years worth of info. I think it's just good practice regardless of what structure you are. I know I've had family members that have just gotten audited as part of the process, but fortunately they were very organized, and not that an audit is ever smooth, but it went as smooth as it could possibly go, right? And the people who are doing that work really appreciate that as well. All right. So kind of one of the last sections we'll look at are employer obligations. So I don't know if there's anyone here in person or on the call that are thinking of hiring employees. Hopefully the business that you're starting does lead to that, because to me, that's the ultimate goal, is being able to employ others in your community. So there's a few things to think about. And that's payroll deductions is the first one. So for both of these, the Government of Canada has some great resources. They even have some like online calculators that you can use to get a good idea of what payroll deductions you should be paying. So the first one we're going to look at is employment insurance, so EI. It's not mandatory if you're self-employed, but I think there's an option if you do. They have a special program, but it's mandatory for all employees on the payroll, and both the employee and the employer contribute. So I think a lot of people during COVID especially really were like, thank God I have EI, right? So I feel like before that's not something a lot of people really thought about, but I think definitely because of that situation, it's come to the forefront. And then the other deduction is Canada Pension Plan, CPP, mandatory for all working individuals, including if you're self-employed, okay? So again, Government of Canada has some great resources on that. Definitely feel free to reach out. We're happy to help you navigate that. All right. Employment standards, huge, huge, huge. So if you are thinking about hiring employees, I encourage you to be familiar with employment standards. The Government of Saskatchewan has a whole department on employment standards. They have information on everything. They have a lot of on-demand videos, webinars. So there's a lot of resources to familiarize yourself with, whether it's, complaints, fines, wages, all of that. I tell business owners or employers, if for some reason there's a dispute with an employee, God forbid it goes to court or something like that, you can't use the excuse of I didn't know. I didn't know is not it's not valid. It's your responsibility as an employer to be familiar with these employment standards. Now, I get there's a lot of information to know, so do your best to learn as much as you can, but just make that a regular resource that you go to, okay? So make sure you familiarize yourself with employment standards. Another one is workers' compensation. So it's required for all businesses that have employees or directors on payroll. If you're unsure about whether or not you need to register for WCB, contact them directly. I know I've had several meetings with them and they always say, yeah, just reach out. We're happy to work with businesses and set that up. So yeah, definitely reach out to them once you're hiring employees, or even before you officially hire employees. I would suggest reaching out to them before, so you have a good understanding of steps to come. So to finish off with just a few other considerations in the startup process. So one is a bank account. So once you have those registration documents, bringing that to the bank, they can help you set that up. Another one is insurance. It's generally optional, but usually recommended. Again, think about your industry. What risks do you have? You know, I feel like nowadays you can insure everything, whether it's, you know, theft, natural disaster liability, like you could even insure your legs, probably, like body parts. Is crazy. I'm kind of digressing, but really think about your business. What's worth protecting? Insurance might be the thing for you, okay? And for both bank accounts, insurance, shop around, find the right rates, find the right benefits, find the right people to work with. You don't have to go with the first one that you see. Often a good place to start, like for bank account, start with, where do you bank personally, right? Most likely they're more accommodating to work with if you're already banking there personally. Same thing with insurance. So maybe if you have like home insurance or some sort of insurance, often great place to start, right? They're usually more accommodating to work with. All right. So I know we've gone through a lot. I've kind of sped through it a bit, but you know, you have your business plan, kind of lays out the foundation for how are you going to tackle your business, right? It's no longer jumbled thoughts in your head. It's on paper. You have a clear plan. Next, you've looked at financing or thought about where you're getting your financing. Where is that going to come? There's a lot of resources out there for that. And then it's, what are those steps to starting? So I know that's a lot to think about, but don't worry, SAS Startup Institute is here to support you through that journey. Again, entrepreneurship is not something you do alone. You have your partners, you have your advisors, you have your mentors. So we're just one of many people that are going to be in your corner to help you through this journey. So I'm going to touch on a few of the main services we have to finish up here today. So the first one is expert guidance. So we have a number of advisors that you're able to meet with for free. We can meet in person, by Zoom, by phone, or even correspond by email, whatever you prefer. So we have an office in Saskatoon and Regina. So typically those are the only spots we do in person, unless we're traveling out and about, happy to do that. But wherever you are in Saskatchewan, we're able to support you on that. So we're there to help you with questions, whether it's business planning, setup steps, strategy. Another big piece that we do is pathfinding. So connecting you with other organizations, service providers, experts. Our network is very, very extensive. So that's another big piece that we do. Market research, like we talked about, again, take advantage of it. It's free. It'll help set that foundation for your whole plan. Business registration assistance, like I mentioned, reach out to our team, happy to help you through that process, make sure it's done correct. As I've alluded to a few times, we do have a guide section on our website where we have topics on various startup areas and different checklists and templates, things like that. And then we can also provide various document templates. So whether it's a partnership agreement or a non-disclosure agreement, like I mentioned, things like that, we're able to provide. And then one of the last ones I'll mention is our Ask an Expert program. So this is our only paid service. So everything else we do is free, except for this. So in this program, you're able to access one-on-one meetings with experts such as lawyers, accountants, marketing experts, business planners, and a commercial realtor. You can have one meeting in each of these categories per year, right? So essentially you could have like 5 meetings per year, one in each category. And meetings are 45 minutes and cost $25. So $25 for 45 minutes with a lawyer, no brainer. Of course, they can't do everything in 45 minutes, but say you have a couple high-level legal questions that are just that hurdle that keeps you from going to that next step. Spend the $25, get those questions answered, and it gets you going a little bit quicker. So to book meetings with experts or for further info, it's all on our website. You can pay, book right through our website. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. Lastly is our events calendar. So we do host various webinars and workshops. So kind of a lot of what I talked about today. So we do one on business planning, starting a business, and we also do one on generating an idea as well, amongst various others, with some new webinars and workshops coming soon. So stay tuned for that. But we don't only post our own events on this page. We want this page to be kind of the one stop you can go for all events and learning opportunities for entrepreneurs in Saskatchewan. So we post basically all those other organizations I mentioned. We have all their events, or as many as we can, on our events page. So if you're looking for more learning opportunities, networking opportunities, I encourage you to visit that website, and I'm sure you'll find something you'll enjoy. So whether it's learning more about financial fundamentals, marketing, whatever it is, go check it out, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So to wrap things up, as I mentioned, we do have 2 office locations. So our main one is in Saskatoon. We also do have an office in Regina, but as I mentioned, we do support all of Saskatchewan. So wherever you are, feel free to reach out by email. I tell people there's no risk or hurdle. Like, the services are free. The worst thing that can happen when you reach out by email, ask a question is, sorry, we don't know the answer, but hey, most likely we do have a connection or someone that we know that can answer. So my big thing is, let us be that first stop on your journey towards entrepreneurship, and let us help you build that right foundation to start. So reach out to us by phone, email. So info@skstartup.ca is a great place. Follow our Facebook page is often a great place to know what we're doing and also what our ecosystem partners are up to as well. And for those of you that are in Saskatoon, we do host walk-in hours Mondays and Wednesdays. If you're around, happy to pop by. But like I said, reach out. Happy to help you through this journey of entrepreneurship. It's not done alone. You have organizations like myself, Community Futures, Tech Hub out there to support you. So with that, I'll wrap things up, and happy to answer any questions if there are in the room. And we can go from there. I don't know if there's any online or if we're able to track that.
They're really quiet tonight.
Okay. I know I threw a lot of info out there, so definitely follow up. Yeah.
I have to say the marketing research is huge.
Yes,
I've already sent a few companies your way.
Yeah.
Because market research can cost a lot of money.
Yes.
And if you don't know what your product is, you don't know what your market research is, you're screwed. And everything else comes. So what you guys offer is a godsend. And then the other thing we run into a lot is people who are the whole incorporation, the name search, the name registration. Try to do that yourself.
Yeah.
That's tough. So that's great that you do that. Yeah,
our goal is we understand entrepreneurship is often a very anxious time for people. Entrepreneurs are vulnerable, right? There's a lot of risk with it too. So there's a lot going on. So if we can help alleviate that worry, right, that anxiety, to really help you be able to focus on those things that you love to do and help you take care of those kind of necessary but sometimes not fun pieces of the puzzle. So
it was awesome. Thank you so
absolutely.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely.